Hello dear friends. This video is specially made to help you improve your English listening skills. Every sentence and passage you'll hear contains words from the Oxford 3000, the most essential and commonly used words in English. By listening and reading along, you'll become more familiar with these words, improve your pronunciation, and build confidence in everyday communication. Let's begin your journey to mastering the core of English. A student with the ability to absorb an academic accent was able to access acceptable accommodation abroad, but after an accidental accident above the dorm, she abandoned her account, was accused of abuse, and absolutely refused to acknowledge the absence of accurate data. According to the report that tried to account for her being absent and unable to accept the absolute need to accompany others or abandon her academic goals. A couple of active performers, an actor and an actress, actually achieved an achievement across the stage by acting with admiration and adapting to acid lights, acknowledging that each ad should add up to an adequate result, adequately address the crowd, and add additional charm to acquire real admire for the actual activity in action, after a quick adjust to timing. An adult agent from an advertising agency advised an aged couple to adopt an aggressive advert after their afternoon adventure, admitting the advantage of advertising affection over affairs, and agreeing that the advertisement wouldn't affect those afraid of age, but could afford to advanced advice again afterwards, even after years ago when they were against such ads. An Allied aircraft flew ahead alongside an airport where an alarmed but alive alcoholic, almost alone, read the alphabet aloud in alphabetical order to alter an agreement that would allow for aid and aim to allow all allies to feel all right, also agreeing that alcohol is alarming but already allowed along the air. Although the angry animal angrily bit an ankle at 9 a.m. during an ancient anniversary among amused guests, an ambulance was announced, and the angle of the amusing incident amazed analysts who analyzed the amount it amounted to, always noting the ambition behind the alternative plan, which was altogether annoying but amazing. Alternatively, the announcement amused many despite the anger it caused. An anxious applicant, apparently annoyed by another annual application for an apartment, anxiously apologized for the annoying delay, anticipating an anti-anxiety appeal that might appear in an Apple-themed ad. Apart from that, anyone, anybody, or anything could apply anywhere anyway, as the appointed officer answered that, apart from the anti-rule, every appearance annually would be allowed. In April, an armed army arrived around the area to approve an appointment and an arrangement, while artists argued about an article on artificial art, appreciating the appropriate approach. Approximately, the approving officer noted the arrival, the arrow of time, and how events arose, and everyone artificially arranged arms to arrive at an approximate solution. An artistic artist, ashamed of an attempted attack, asked an assistant to assist aside from attending to atoms and attached aspects, assuring that the atmosphere at the association would attend to attention and attitude, while others artistically associated as asleep at the time, assuming nothing, but attaching importance to every attempt. In August, An attractive author received an award from the authority for automatically backing up an awful background study about bacteria that attracted an audience, including her aunt and an attorney, who awkwardly walked backward and then backwards away from the baby, who was awake and aware of the autumn air, while avoiding the average automatic reaction and awkwardly trying to stay available. A bad-tempered bear with a bandage on its beak was badly injured in a battle near the beach, where a band played behind a barrier by the bay, and a basic ban based on safety concerns was put in place by the bank, which also offered a bargain on battery-powered bags. Meanwhile, a bar near the bathroom baked balanced meals, and a child lost his ball and baggage during a bath, which was the basis of being banned from the beach. Before the bell rang, a beautiful man with a beard began to behave badly on behalf of his belief, trying to beat up someone who didn't believe in beauty, but bent below the bed in the bedroom to avoid beef and beer, which were left over behind the belt, because of bad behavior that began at the beginning, and although he didn't belong there, he believed he could become better and beautifully bend his will. On his birthday, a big black bird bit a biscuit beside a bin beneath a bicycle, while a bitterly bent blade from a bike caused a biology student to blame a blank betting bill for the billion-dollar bid gone wrong, though the best benefit between birth and death lies beyond blame, and he knew better than to bet or bite back. A blonde boss, born near the border, was bored on a blue boat when a bomb blew up and blew out a bottle at the bottom of a box, boiling blood beside a bowl of bones, while a blind man borrowed a book and boots, blocked the board, and didn't bother that both his body and boot were bound to a boring task. A brave boy brought breakfast and bread to his brilliant boyfriend on the bright bridge, where a breed of birds broke into a branch, broke off bricks, and broke out briefly before breaking up. Meanwhile, he breathed in, breathed out, and felt his breath and breathing slow down, thinking about the brand of breast milk, the brain's breakdown, and how a break in belief can bring brief pain beneath it all. A brown bush burst into flames and burnt the building down, bringing out a bunch of broken bubbles and bullets, while a businessman brought forward a budget to build up business, broadly broadcast by his brother who burst out laughing on the bus, brushing off the burnt brush, and trying to bring back hope, bring down fear, bring up facts, and bury the past that burned but couldn't break him. A busy buyer called to cancel a campaign for cancer awareness at the camp, but calmly agreed to call back and call off camping, then called up a cabinet to calculate the cable cost by pressing a button beside the camera, while eating cake with butter, saying bye to the calm camper who can buy more, and who was called to calm down after a calculation error. A capable candidate with a careful career cannot carry on carelessly, so he carefully carried out a case involving a cat who cast cash under a carpet in a castle, while the captain tried to capture a careless man with a cardboard cap who didn't care for candy or carrots, and dropped a card near the Capitol, where a car tried to catch him but failed due to lack of capacity. A certain chairman and chairwoman sat beneath the ceiling of a central chamber to celebrate a century-old ceremony, where a certificate was awarded to a cell phone channel that helped catch up on every chapter, change round the category of causes, and cease fake chains. The celebration included a CD, a cent-sized cake, a centimeter-wide challenge, and a chance to change lives at the center. A cheerful character at a charity chatted cheerfully with a chemist about chemistry, cheese, and chicken, while checking in with a check, checking on a chart, checking into a cheap hotel, and being chased away after trying to cheat a chicken seller and cheat him of change. He checked out, checked over his chest, chewed quietly, then was charged for a chemical found in his cheek, and had to check up on it. A civil citizen in the city chose a classic chocolate chip over a cigarette, clearly a clean choice, while a child in class clapped as the chief clerk cleaned up the classroom, chopped off a branch to clear out space, and chopped down a tree near the church. Under those circumstances, the cinema formed a circle of people to claim peace, and the clerk had to clear up a cut on his chin. A clever client clicked the clock closely before climbing into a closet full of clothes and clothing, wearing a coat on the cold coast under a cloud, sipping coffee with a coin beside a collapsed club where a coach and colleague collected coal for a climate project, while the code was closed coldly, and the collection of cloth was close to collapse, but the club did not close. A colored column in the college came down during a comedy show, where a comfortable student came from a commercial committee and came up to comment on the commission's commitment to combine color and comfort. He came in, came out, came round, and came across a common command to come off the stage, but chose to commit instead, saying, "Come on, let's come to a combination that works comfortably." A commonly concerned member of the community complained about a complicated competition at a concert, where a company tried to communicate a concept through a computer, but the comparison concluded with a complaint about the concrete condition of communication, and the competitive event completely failed to concentrate on the concern, complicating the conclusion. Meanwhile, the company had to complete a complex task, concentrate on concentration, and explain everything concerning the concert to the company. A confident Congress member conducted a confusing conference to confront a conflict, causing confusion among the conservative audience, who were confined by constant consequence and couldn't connect the considerable consideration that consisted of a conscious choice. The confused speaker confirmed the connection confidently, congratulated the crowd with a congratulation, and asked them to consider what they consist of, while trying not to confine their confidence. A contemporary consumer was constantly contacting a cook to consult about a contest, where the content and context continued to contrast with conventional contributions. The controlled container couldn't contain the continuous construction noise from the continent, so the cook tried to convince the convention to convert the contract into something more convenient, while contributing to a conversation about how contrasting styles contribute to control and how construction must continuously be carefully constructed. A couple from the countryside stayed in a cotton-covered cottage near the corner of the county, where a cooker was cooking cookies to help them cope and cool down after coughing. They could count on their cousin to cover the cost, and the council showed courage in court during the course of a correct decision, correctly made at the counter, proving the core values of the country. A crazy criminal tried to cover up a crime during a crisis, but the crowd criticized him for being cruel. The crown was cracked, the cream was crushed, and a cow crashed into a craft fair where a creature created a crucial crop, crossing out the critical criterion for credit, while a credit card was used to buy a crisp crown covering, and the cross was covered in criticism. A curious customer cried out when a curly-haired cyclist crushed a cup and cut off the current, causing the curtain to curl up near the cupboard. The cultural customs of the culture required her to cut back emotions, cut down complaints, cut out drama, and cut up the curved curtain, while cycling through a cycle of cure and curb, hoping to cure the pain and understand the custom more curiously. One dark December day, a dear dad dared to dance with his deaf daughter, a dancer who danced daily despite danger and decay. They decided to deal with damage and debt from a decade of death and debate, and decided on a date to deal in data that dated back to a damp disaster. Though the dead were gone, the danger remained, and only love could truly heal what was lost. The department made a definite decision to declare a deliberate delay in delivery, which deeply delighted the delicate dentist who had demanded defense against defeat. He was delighted to define and demonstrate the definition of delight, and would definitely defend his degree, deny decline, decorate his office with decorative decoration, and deliver a decrease in demand, deliberately designed to decrease stress. Despite the depressing destruction of the deserted desert, a determined designer with deep desire and determination sat at her desk to develop a design that would describe in detail the depth of despair. She deposited her hopes, depended on her dream, and desperately tried to determine how to derive strength from development, knowing she didn't deserve to be depressed, and that her departure would depend on the outcome. The devoted director disagreed with the dictionary's definition of diet, noting the difference between digital and dinner habits. He devoted his diary to diagramming the direction of disabled devices, digging through dirt and difficulty to directly highlight how diamonds die out, ideas die away, and how dirty disadvantages affect those who disagree differently. Despite disagreement, he stayed devoted to helping those with difficult lives. After a disappointing discussion about a dishonest discount, the disapproving customer displayed disapproval and dismissed the waiter, disgusted by the disgusting dish that caused disease. She disagreed with doing business there again, expressing her disappointment and dislike, then dissolved the deal, distancing herself from the disaster. Meanwhile, the manager discovered a dishonest employee who had dishonestly altered the disc and disc records, leading to disciplinary action and the discovery of a deeper issue that didn't just disappear with distance. A divorced doctor in a domestic district had to do without $12 after a disturbing divorce. She went downstairs to do up the door, distributed a draft document to distinguish a division of property, and saw her dog chasing a dot downward. Despite doubt, she did with what she had, dominated the situation, and learned to divide pain from peace, even when disturbed by double shifts and downward moods. During a dramatic drama, a drunk driver tried to drive off and drive away, but dropped a drug near the drugstore and was dragged out by a dull drummer who dreamed of drawing while dressed in a dress. He had to dry up his tears, and dress up for court, where his dream drawer was dumped, and he was due to drop out of driving school after dramatically drinking too much. Early each morning, an educated editor from the eastern edge of Earth would eat up economic reports, eat out with each other to ease stress, and earn an easy living by writing an efficient and effective edition on the effect of education on the economy, Despite the dying DVD industry, she educated others to eat well, do their duty, and listen with open ears, working effectively and easily to dust off old ideas. The elderly candidate was elected in the 18th election, held on the 11th of the month, after sending an elegant email elsewhere to embarrass his opponent with an embarrassing story about an egg dropped near the elevator. Despite being embarrassed, the opponent made an effort to respond efficiently, mentioning either electric or electronic elements, from the 8th to the 80th floor, and how electricity and electrical systems failed on 80 devices, including elbows of robots. After an emotional emergency that ended in embarrassment, the employee encountered her employer, who emphasized the importance of energy and encouragement to enable her to enjoy engineering again. She engaged emotionally with the engine design, employed her skills, and emerged from the empty empire of doubt, ending up as an engineer who encouraged others, even her enemies, to engage with emotion and employment, with emphasis on enjoying every ending. The enthusiastic entertainer entered the enormous entertainment hall with enough equipment to ensure an enjoyable experience. The entire environment was especially entertaining, and the audience responded with equal enthusiasm, enjoying the essay entitled "Escape from Error," which was enclosed in an envelope at the entrance. The inquiry about environmental impact was answered enthusiastically, and everyone enjoyed the equivalent enjoyment equally, entirely forgetting the entry fee. One evening, everybody and everyone gathered for an exam to examine the exact evidence of an exaggerated event that eventually led an ex-estate agent to establish an excellent example of how even evil can be everywhere. The Euro estimate was essentially incorrect, and everything, except the examination, was exaggerated. But every person ever involved agreed it was essential to understand exactly what happened, etc. The experienced expert was excited to exhibit his experiment at the exhibition, an exciting event expected to expand the exchange of ideas and explore the existence of creativity. Despite the expensive expense, the executive made no excuse to exclude anyone, excluding no exception, and explained with excitement that the explanation would explode expectations. After the exercise, he shared his experience, explored the exhibit, and exited with a sense of accomplishment. After the explosion at the factory, the faithful worker had to face up to the extreme failure caused by an exposed export error. He fainted faintly, but faithfully expressed his faith in the facility's recovery, despite the extensive damage and the extraordinary extent of the fall. The fact is, every factor, fair or unfair, was fairly considered, and the eyewitness gave a fairly accurate expression, while the extension of repairs will extend beyond expectations. In February, a famous farmer fastened the faucet at his fashionable farm, where his family, familiar with farming, fed fans with their favorite fat-free dishes. Farther from the federal fair, the father faced fear of false fame, but with a feather of hope and a fancy feature in fashion, he moved fast, accepted the fee, and offered a favor, knowing the fault wasn't his and the farthest field still needed feed. After the final fight at the festival, a female fellow with a fever tried to fetch the 50th file from the field, but could only fill in 15 forms and fill out a financial figure. she felt few feelings, finally managed to fill up the fence with 50 flags, and began filming a film about fighting finance, trying to figure out how to feel better on the 15th, when she hoped to find peace. After the fire flashed across the flat floor, 5 flags floated near the flame, and the firm fixed the flooding faucet that had flooded the fishing area. The first fish finished its flight, and the flavor of flesh was finally cooked to fit in with the feast. She firmly used her finger to find out how to fix the flood, then finished off the task with a fine smile. The former football player, formerly known for his flying footwork, forgot to follow up on the foreign forecast and flew into the forest, where a flower bloomed near folding forks of flower. He focused on food, forgave the flu, and tried to form a formal apology, formally written with force. The formula for forgiveness flowed forever, and he promised never to forget the flying foot that folded under pressure. On the 40th Friday, a friendly friend found a freshly frozen frame in the front fridge, which frightened away 4 frequent visitors who were frightened by the frightening freeze. The foundation of their friendship was freedom, to move forward freely from fear, but the fortune of 40 fresh meals was lost. On the 14th, they celebrated the 4th year of friendship, and frequently reminded each other not to be frightened off by surprises. After the funeral, they gathered at the garden gate near the garage, where a funny game helped fill the gap left by grief. They fried frozen fruit, fueled by fun and a gallon of gasoline, while discussing the future and the fundamental need to fund clean fuel. The furniture was full of fur and garbage, but they fully embraced the moment, refusing to gamble on gambling, and instead chose to gain peace, function as a family, and go further together. A gentle gentleman from the geography generation got up early to get through the giant gate, hoping to get into the genuinely generous club where people get on with life, get over failure, and get back on track. He gently offered genuine gear, generously shared stories, and managed to get out of trouble without getting away with anything. He generally tried to get round to helping others, get by with kindness, and generate joy. The girl was glad to give away a gold gift to her girlfriend, who had refused to give in, give up, or go away from her global goal. They gave back the goods, gave out gloves, and gave off good vibes. As they went ahead to go into the glass hall, the glue holding their bond didn't go off. They said goodbye to the past, went back to what mattered, and let God guide them as they watched the sun go down. The governor went on going through with the grant for his grandson's grammar school, while his grandmother and grandfather, both proud grandparents, went over his grades and grabbed a grain of hope. Though progress was gradual, he gradually improved, going without complaints. His granddaughter, a grand student, went out with friends, while he went on to go to college, go up in rank, and go through challenges that the government couldn't govern. He never went out without purpose and always went with courage. The grateful guest stood on the green grass outside the hall, where a guy with gray hair handed back a hammer to the hairdresser, who had grown up near the grocery and was now a guide for a group of guards. They guessed the guilty man had buried the gun near the grave, and though gravely concerned, they greatly appreciated the growth in his habit of helping others. He handed over half the groceries and promised to change, a guarantee he swore on the ground. The happy girl handed in her homework and handed out hats to her friends, who happily hung around with her, hanging about the park where nothing harmful happened to anyone. She handed over her phone, hung up the call, and hung on to the hope that happiness would be handed down like a harmless habit. Though it was hard and she hardly smiled, she learned to handle hatred without hate, and promised to have back what she had on her heart. He had to help out her hero, who suffered a heavy headache and needed to heal his heart, hence, she said hello and offered helpful advice about health, heating, and how to heat up soup. Though the heat rose heavily and the height of stress felt like hell, she stayed here, hoping to hear from heaven. Hearing of his pain, she helped him stand on his heel, and they both felt healthy again. The head cleared, and hers was full of hope. She found herself on a high hill near the highway, where he had hit a hollow tree while trying to hide his historical hobby. Though she didn't hesitate to help him hold on, he held back tears and held on to hope. They hired a guide to highlight the history of the holy site nearby, and during the holiday, she held out her hand and said hi. It was a highly emotional moment, and they both felt at home, no longer needing to hold up the pain or fill the hole inside themselves. After a humorous host blew a horn to honor the 100th hour of the horror-themed hotel hunt, a hungry human hurried to the hospital, hoping the horse he'd hooked wouldn't need housing. Honestly, the household was hot with humor, and the horizontal heat made homework hard. However, he felt honest hope that the huge house would survive the hunt, and though hunting was banned, he still had 100 hooks to hang. I had to hurry up and immediately bring ice and ice cream to my ill husband, who was hurt and impatient, struggling with an illness that had an immediate impact on his identity, i.e., how he saw himself. He tried to ignore the implications, but I could imagine how immoral and illegal actions, done illegally, had hurt him. It wasn't ideal, but the idea was to illustrate how even imaginary fears can imply real pain. His imagination helped him identify with others, and that image gave him hope. The incident happened just an inch from the index page, where an independent analyst tried to import data to indicate the importance of income and the increasingly impossible task of improvement. Indeed, the inability to improve independently was impressive, not in a good way, but it did include an indirect indication that we must not impose limits. Importantly, the report impressed readers, who were impressed by the indirect yet important message about independence, and the need to act, even if only indirectly. The injured individual, initially infected by an insect bite indoors, insisted on staying inside the industrial facility where the infection inevitably spread. The injury was minor, but the infectious influence of misinformation made it worse. An informal report was inserted with ink, informing the industry of the inner risks. Though the ingredient seemed innocent, the initiative to inform others became important. She insisted on sharing accurate information, proving that even indoor cases can impact the outside world. Instead of accepting the insulting interruption during the interview, she insisted on doing the interpretation herself, showing intelligent use of the Internet to install an instrument that could interpret internal signals. Her intention was clear. She intended to follow the instruction from the institute, not the institution that insulted her intelligence. The interval between each international instance was interesting, and she remained interested in the interior design field. Her insurance covered the damage, and her interest never wavered. In January, she received an invitation to an island retreat, where she was invited to introduce her latest invention, a jelly that could turn into jam by itself. The item, wrapped in a jacket made of recycled jeans, was part of an investment pitch that involved a detailed investigation into its ingredients. The issue was that the iron content irritated some testers, who felt jealous of others not affected. Though the invention was irritating to a few, its introduction sparked interest and led to further involvement and investment. In July, a keen junior journalist decided to join a journey for justice, hoping to justify the judgment of a judge who had just kicked out a joint case. She joined in joy, wearing jewelry she kept from June, and brought juice to keep up with the heat. Her job was to keep out of trouble, keep up with the facts, and never joke about justice. She typed furiously on her keyboard, trying to find the key to a justified story. The kind lady kindly helped the kid in the kitchen, where a kilogram of knitted yarn lay beside a knife and a knot. She had knowledge of knitting and worked in a laboratory, not just a lab. The king, lacking kindness, tried to knock down her spirit, but she kissed the child's knee and showed that even a lake of sorrow couldn't kill her joy. Though the label said "labor required," she knew the killing of hope was the real knockout. The lazy lawyer laughed at the latest launch of a leather lamp, which lay on a large leaf beside the lane. The leader of the league leaned in to learn the language of the land, where the law was largely based on the latter layer of tradition. Though it was late, he stayed until later to leave with the least confusion. The landscape was leading in beauty, and she promised to lead the way next time. After the lecture at the library, she left a letter on the lid of a box containing a lemon, a license, and a license form. Her leg hurt, so she had to lie down and let life lift her lightly. Though the lesson was long in length, she liked it and was likely to lend her notes. She didn't leave out the legal parts, even those about how to lie and not let others down. She let off a smile and reached a new level. In a lively local location, a little girl with a logical mind listened to literature while sipping a liter of liquid. She lived through hardship, learned to live on hope, and now lives together with others in a limited space. Her lips curled into a smile as she locked up the loan papers, loaded the list of items, and followed the line to locate where she was meant to be. Though the logic of life can be hard to grasp, she knew it wasn't limited to what we see. The lonely lord looked out for his lost lover, whose loud laugh he used to look up to. Though he suffered a great loss, he looked after the lorry drivers and looked into their low wages. He looked on with hope, looked through old letters, and looked forward to a lovely day. He didn't look down on anyone, but looked round the land loosely tied to his heart. Love was loud, and he had a lot to lose, but he never let it go loose for long. The loyal manager at the mall tried to maintain the machinery with a lucky lump of magic. He made up for the mad mistake by turning the machine into a mail sorter, which the majority of male staff found useful. During lunch, the man read a magazine about management and manners, while the main topic was how to make up for lost luggage. The manager managed to make a makeup kit from spare parts, mainly to help a woman with a lung condition feel lucky again. In March, the mayor invited me to a marketing event where many manufacturers showcased their latest manufacturing materials. One massive map marked the market zones, and a master of mathematics explained how to match up supply and demand. I met my old mate there, who was married in May and spoke about his marriage like it was a perfect match. Over a meal, we discussed how to manufacture success, and maybe, just maybe, what really matters isn't the maximum profit, but who you marry along the march. Meanwhile, the member of the medical team tried to measure the mental impact of the message, using a method that involved memory tests and a medium-sized metal device. The meeting was intense, and the medicine began to melt in the heat. He mentioned the menu, which included meat, but she was mentally exhausted and could merely nod. The meter-long cable was a mess, and the media coverage didn't meet expectations. They planned to meet up later to discuss the meaning and what it might mean for their membership. At midnight, the minister from the ministry made a mild speech about a military mistake that might have caused a missing mirror and 1,000,000 milligrams of lost minerals. In the middle of the mile-long hall, a minority of guests missed the minute announcement and were mistaken about the 1,000,000th visitor. One minor mistake was to miss out on the milk served at midday. I didn't mind, though, it wasn't mine. The minimum effort led to a mid-level success, and no one was mistaken for someone else. On Monday morning, my mom and I watched the moon fade behind the mountain as a modern motorbike sped past in swift motion. The model on the motorcycle looked mixed in mood, mostly moral, but morally shaken. At that moment, my mobile phone rang. It was my mother reminding me not to mix up the money for the month. I smiled at the mixture of memories, mounted my motor, and checked the monitor. Life is a mix of more and most, and moreover, it moves fast. Mr. Mouse moved into a mysterious museum with my mum, Mrs. Smith, and Ms. Lee. The movement was slow, as mud covered the floor and a nail poked through the carpet. A musician played music from a musical about a murder mystery, and I found myself strangely moved. My mouth was dry, my muscles tense, and I must admit I felt naked in that moment. We watched a movie at the movie theater later, and though we had to move out quickly, it was very much worth it. The nation's Navy officer, whose name was nearly forgotten, stood near a narrow path in a natural reserve, watching a bird build its nest neatly. He was nervous, his neck stiff, and he held a needle to fix a torn net. Nearby, his nephew, never one to act nervously, explained the necessary steps to restore the network. Neither neighbor from the neighborhood had the nerve to help, but nature, naturally, offered peace. It wasn't necessarily negative. Sometimes, solitude is all we need. At 9 past 9 on a noisy night, my niece read the newspaper next to me, nicely pointing out the nonsense in the news. Nevertheless, no one, not even the newly elected 19th mayor, could explain the 90th error in the report. Normally, nobody would care, but this was not a normal situation. The noise outside grew noisily as a non-stop protest moved north. None of it made sense, nor did the new rules. "No," she said, "this isn't how things should be." In November, a nurse from the northern region made a noticeable observation: the number of patients with nose infections had increased. She began to note down every case, occasionally adding a nut allergy or nuclear exposure as a possible cause. It did not occur to her at first, but the objective was obvious. Obviously, something strange was happening. On one occasion, she tried to obtain a novel medicine, but the hospital was occupied and nowhere near ready. "Now," she said, "we must obey the signs and observe carefully, not ignore them." At 6 o'clock on an oddly warm October evening, an officer walked into the old-fashioned office near the ocean. "Oh," he said, "this online offer is officially offensive." The official had only one onion left, and the oil was running low. Once, they would offend one another over such nonsense, but now they were okay. The old man turned off the light and stepped onto the porch. Not often did offense turn into friendship, but on this occasion, it did, odd as it was. Our organization decided to open up the discussion about the origin of the operation, which was originally opposed by the opposing side. The opening speech was delivered openly by our opponent, who offered an orange as a symbol of peace. We ought to organize an ordinary meeting to explore every option and opinion. Otherwise, the opposition may operate in the opposite direction. In order to seize the opportunity, we must stay organized and not oppose each other. It's not about organs or orders, it's about unity. Outside the outdoor gallery, we found ourselves admiring an outstanding painting by a famous painter. The owner of the place had packed up a packet of brushes and paint, ready to overcome the painful memory of losing his oven in a fire. He showed us the outer wall's outline and explained the packaging of each package. "Ours is a story of resilience," he said. "We owe it to ourselves to own up to our past." Overall, the pace was calm, and each page of his story felt personal. As we passed through the park near the palace, a pale passenger handed me a passport and a paper. The pants he wore were torn, and his partner had just passed away. In that moment, I felt partly responsible, particularly because we had once been in a partnership. A panel from Parliament was passing by, discussing a passage in the law. My parent joined the party later, bringing a pan and a pair of cups. We sat in parallel, watching the past pass on, hoping not to pass out from emotion. During a peaceful phase of her life, the performer reached the peak of her career. She was a patient person, admired by many people for her calm personality and ability to persuade others with just a phrase. Her performances were not only physical but also philosophical, reflecting a deep belief in the power of peace. She personally requested permission to photograph her pet, and the photographer gave her a photocopy of the photo taken with his phone. She paid out of her pension to print it, even though it cost every penny. The payment was made percent by percent, and she always paid up without complaint. Later, she paused to reflect on the permanent pattern of her path, which she had followed with patience. She used a pen and pencil to write about the period when she had to pay back a debt for petrol and pepper. Perhaps it wasn't perfect, but she handled it perfectly. Her permit to perform was granted permanently, and she considered it a personal victory, proof that philosophy and perseverance could truly shape a life. At exactly 1 p.m., a polite pilot landed his plane on a plane platform near a peaceful place. He was pleased to pick up a pink pin that had fallen from his pocket beside a pile of plastic plates. A pig tried to play with a piano, nudging the keys with its snout. "What a pity," the pilot said, watching the player play about with no pitch or plan. He took a pill, drank a pint of water, and pointed at a picture of a planet, saying, "Physics explains its orbit." The police arrived to point out a poisonous plant near the pole, warning it could poison the pigs. A poem about the planet was read aloud. Its poetry was pleasing and polished. The pilot plugged in a pipe to refill the tank, then helped plug a leak. He physically lifted a piece of metal and placed it beside the plot. The planning was political, but the policy was clear. There was plenty to do, but the atmosphere remained pleasant. He smiled politely, enjoying the pleasure of a job well done. The president, a popular politician speaking politically about politics and pollution at the port, praised a prepared presentation by the press and precisely predicted potential problems: population pressure, price rises and poor living conditions. He proposed practical policies to preserve the premises, pool resources, and prevent harm, and he asked people to prefer peaceful practice kindness practically, while he prayed a short prayer for the pregnant and the needy. He noted the possibility that things could possibly get worse, but remained positive about potential solutions and powerful community power. He would pour funding, pay a pound into the pot, provide potatoes and powder where needed, and post aid from the post office. He pointed out position and pose issues, defended the right to possess property but warned against possession greed, and said he was prepared, having completed the preparation and previously planning measures. He asked the public not to pretend everything is fine, to praise real help rather than pop slogans, to maintain presence and present evidence, and presumably to prevent future crises. With pride the priest, speaking primarily about the primary principle of fairness, welcomed the Prime Minister, a prince and a princess to a forum. They agreed to print, use a printer and manage printing, and to print off draft proofs prior to release. Their priority was to fix a probable problem in procedure so they could proceed through the process to produce a product. The producer outlined production schedules and the role of the profession. A prisoner in the prison, formerly a private citizen, was privately given a prize, probably to highlight reform. A professional professor ran a university program and a community program to promote a project. He made a promise that the initiative would deliver progress and profit. The proposal and proposal details proposed practical steps, showing the proportion of benefit and providing proof that proper and properly managed property can provide protection. The team worked promptly, with a clear prompt to prove prospects and to promptly pronounce policy changes while teaching correct pronunciation. They planned promotion events to promote the plan, prepared promotion materials, and provided support. When protesters threatened the premises, they would protect people and property from protest and ensure protection. The community felt proud and proudly endorsed the prospect. The project proved feasible and the promised benefits were provided. Providing publicity, the pub made public a publication on publishing and publicly publish a video showing a pupil pull apart, pull down, pull in, pull off, pull out, pull over, pull through, pull together and pull up, then punch, punish and face punishment, purchase purely purple goods for the purpose to pursue and push, refusing to be pushed about. The qualified queen put forward a question about the quality and quantity of race entries this quarter, then quickly put on her crown, put in a call, put through a request, put together a team, put up banners, put out statements, put down rumors, put back trophies, put away doubts, put off critics, and vowed to push forward quietly, quite proud to not quit, nor put up with injustice, but to quote rules and ensure all who qualify have equal qualification, whether they speak loud or quiet. The reader read out a realistic radio reaction to racing in the rain, rarely seen on railway or railroad tracks, where rapid trains rarely reach full rank or rate. Rather, they react to raw reality and reread over reports to realize the real range of risk, read over safety rules, get ready to raise awareness, and read about how to read out loud. Read over facts, and read for reading's sake. Because to read is to re-engage with what's real. I really recall the recent reception where I received a red refrigerator and a receipt, despite the refusal to reform the rear system, which I refused to recognize as reasonable or reasonably fair. I reckon we must recover, reduce waste, seek reduction, refer to the record and recording for reference, reflect on the reason, recommend recognition, and reckon on reform, not refuse it. Recently I heard someone refer to a refusal that made me recognize the need to refuse injustice. Regarding the regional regulation, I regret to register that my relative, who regularly rejects religious views and prefers to relax in a relaxing way, must remain in the region, relying on relevant relief and refusing to release any relationship-related concerns. Although the relation remains unclear, We relatively rely on religion for comfort and regard the remaining remains with respect, while we relate to those who rely on faith and reject what doesn't relate to their beliefs. The resident made a remarkable remark in a report to request the removal of a remote, rented device repeatedly in need of repair and replacement, reminding us to remember the requirement to rescue reputation, reply to every representative, reproduce results, represent facts, reserve judgment, research causes, rent only what we require, and remind others of repeated issues. Remarkably, the company did remove it and offered a refund without reservation. The retired chef resolved to return to the restaurant, restore its reputation, revise the menu, review the resources, retain staff, respect restrictions, and resist the urge to resort to shortcuts. Despite resistance, he took responsibility, responded to feedback, reversed poor results, revealed the reason for decline, restricted waste, and accepted that retirement was not the result he wanted. It would result in regret, so he revised his plan, responded with care, and sparked a small revolution in food, proving he was still responsible. The rich rider riding along the rough road near the river saw a romantic rock roll off the roof into a room where a rope hung from a root. He took the risk to rid the place of a rival who tried to rob rice and reward himself, but the rhythm of justice made him rise rightly, not ridiculously, and he played his role well. Ring 1 rang, then ring 2, and they'll ring back roughly at the right time. The royal runner rushed through a rural route, running past a ruined rubber sack in row 1, where a rude rumor made him run away, run after justice, run out of time, run over rubbish, rub his rounded head, and sadly recall how a ruler tried to rule out reform, ruining routine rules. He didn't round the corner but ran through sadness, refusing to be rudely sacked, and proving that even when sad, one can still run. On Saturday, a sailor sailing safely over salty sand felt sadness but found satisfaction in a salad with sauce and salt, said the same about a sample sail, saved money for safety and salary, scared off a crab, wasn't scared, saw a scene that scare could not scale, scheduled a sail to satisfy his soul, was satisfied, found saving satisfying, and said saving can save you, he'll say it again. The scientist scratched the screen with scissors, screamed at the score, saw a screw fall into the sea, sealed off the section secretly with a seal, and told the secretary to seek a secure scheme for the school's science sector. The secondary seat was second only to security, and the secret season began as they searched for a seed to see about planting. Scientific minds must seek, not just see. In September, a senior senator seemed serious as he sent off a servant to see to the separation of self from service, having selected a sensible sentence to serve separately, not self-servingly. He did not sell out but chose to sell off assets, send for legal sense, and seriously support the Senate's selection series, where sensitive issues were separated and each was seen as a self-contained case. During the 70th session, 17 guests set out to settle down after a severe storm set off sharp shadows and shallow shades. 70 sewing kits were set up to sew shaped cloths. Several shared stories of sexual shame. some shaken by sexually severe trauma, others spoke of sex and how it shaped them. One shall not judge, for every shadow has a shape, and healing begins when we settle, share, and shake off the shame. She shouted in shock when a shiny shell hit her shoulder and sharply shot down from the shelf. Shortly after, a shooting star made the sheep shift under the shelter. The ship's shower broke, her shirt got wet, her shoe tore, and she had to shave, shop for shopping sheets, show a shocking shot, shoot down rumors, and wear a short skirt. She should rest, but chose to shine instead. Since the shy girl in silk didn't show off or show round the silver sign, she simply stayed silent in sideways sight, shut in by sick thoughts, shut out by silence, and shut up when asked to show up. She gave a sincere signature, sincerely smiled, and saw a signal to shut down the silly noise. Similar minds, similarly hurt, found simple comfort in a significant gesture that restored side-by-side sincerity. Sir, a single skilled singer began singing under the sky at a site where his sister, wearing a skirt and a sleeve with a slight tear, sat down to sleep. She had 16 slices of cake, slid one across the 6th plate, slightly sank into the 60th chair, and said the situation was skillfully handled. Though the sink overflowed, the skin of the fruit was soft, and 6 guests with 60 skills admired the size of his skill. Some smart soldier slipped on a smooth slope covered in snow and soil, smashing a solid solution bottle of soap, softly smiling as smoke rose slowly from the small fire where a snake slithered. The sock he wore was soft, the smell was strange, and though society moved socially slow, he knew smoking wasn't the solution, so he used software to solve a social issue, smiled at the thought, and walked smoothly toward a better world. Somewhere in the southern space, somebody sang a song that touched the soul of someone sore and sorry, who would soon speak up, speak out, and sort out something sour from the source. Sometimes, somehow, a special speaker or specialist can spare a sound, a soup, or a sort of southern comfort specially made for the son of a somewhat silent spirit, because to speak is to heal, and every sound is special. In spring, the staff gave a spiritual speech at the square to speed up the spirit of sport, specifically to spread out spicy food with a spoon, spray spice on a spider-shaped cake, and squeeze in a spelling contest where someone split up the words, spun around in spite, and spoiled the mood with poorly spoken lines. Yet the stable crowd spotted the split, didn't spend time on spite, and spelled every word with specific care. At the station, a star made a statement to stand up for those who stand out, stand by truth, and stand for steady values. She started off on the stage, started out strong, started up a movement, and told others to stay away from stealing steel statues, stay out of shady stares, and stay steady. She stamped her status with steam, stared at the state standard, stood back, stood up, and didn't let anyone steal her spotlight. A stranger stepped stiffly down the steep street, stomach aching from sticky stock soup stirred on the stove, trying to steer straight through the storm. He stuck to his strategy, didn't stop, even when stones stung his feet and a stream strained his steps. Still, he stuck up for the strange story, stuck out in the crowd, stuck to the plan, stored hope, felt the sting of loss, and strangely smiled as he reached the store. The stressed student struggled to study in the studio, where a strong stroke of stress struck him like a striped string stretched too tight. He stripped away stupid stuff, chose a strict style, strictly followed the structure, and found strength in the subject's substance. His success was substantial. He succeeded substantially, didn't substitute effort, and wore a striking shirt with a stripe to celebrate the style of success. On a sunny Sunday in summer, a supporter with a suitcase gave a suitable suggestion to support those who suffer sudden suffering, supplying sugar and sufficient food from the supermarket, which was sufficiently stocked. She was sure the suit she wore suited the superior cause, and she successfully summed up the summary with such success that even those who suppose kindness sucks were suddenly inspired, not to suck hope away, but to suggest love instead. She was surprisingly sweet, wearing a sweater near the swimming pool, where a suspicious survey caused suspicion that made her surroundings sweat. She swore without swearing, swung her arms to survive the swelling heat, switched off the swing, swallowed her pride, and swept the surface clean. Surely her surname would surprise anyone who suspected she'd switch roles, swim through the swell, and surround herself with strength instead of switching off. The tall teacher took on the task to teach a sympathetic system of talk and taste, tackling the target with a tablet on the table, where a swollen tail tapped the tank and spilled tea. She took off her tape, took in the symbol of sympathy, took back her words, took down notes, took away doubt, took up courage, and took over the class, then called a taxi, paid the tax, and left with grace. The teacher told off the team of 10 for a terrible test, where the 10th term was terribly wrong. She used a technical technique to teach via television and telephone, explained the temperature's tendency to rise, and thanked them for the text, saying thanks before tearing up temporarily. Though the tension in the tent was high, she knew technology could help more than tears, and that temporary setbacks tend to tear us down before lifting us up. They were 13, sitting in the theater, thinking about the theme of a theory that the thief, thin but thickly disguised, had stolen something that was theirs. Then they began to think of themselves as the third group to think over the thing, think up a plan, and think of it as justice. The thickness of the plot made them thirsty, but they thanked the staff, thought of them kindly, and said thank you to their host. Therefore, there was no doubt that the thick mystery had been solved. On Thursday, the 30th of this month, 3,000 people tied up a tight thread of thought throughout a thorough and threatening event, where the 13th ticket holder threw out a threat that threatened to throw away the 1,000th chance. Though his throat was dry and his thumb sore, he spoke tightly and was thoroughly tidy. Thus, he did not tie his fate to a tidy lie, but walked through the crowd with a tie and dignity. Today, a tired teacher tipped over a tin of tomatoes near the toilet, tired out from a tiring timetable. Till tomorrow, she vowed to stay together with her tiny team to tackle the topic from top to toe, using every tool and tooth of wisdom to tone down the tension. Though the total weight felt like a ton or even a ton, she kept her tongue sharp, her tone kind, and gave the title, Time to Talk Tonight. The tourist took a tough tour through town, touching a transparent tower and tracing the tradition of trading and trade, where toys were transferred and transformed by travelers. Traffic slowed transportation, but the train arrived with towels, tools, and a toy to translate a translation traditionally used in training. Totally a trap for those who travel without tracking time, yet towards the end, the traveler saw how transport can transform culture. On Tuesday, a tropical trip turned into trouble when a truck hit a tree near the tunnel, causing a trial where the truth was hard to trust. Though the tune on the tube was truly calming, she tried on trousers, tried out a triangle-shaped treat, and learned the trend was to turn off fear, turn on hope, turn down doubt, turn back regret, and turn into someone who could treat others with kindness, because every trick can turn out true. On the 20th of the month, two twins turned up at their uncle's house with a twisted tire and an umbrella, unable to turn over the TV or turn round the ugly situation. The 12th type of twist was typically uncomfortable, and the unemployed man they met was unconscious from the unexpected fall. Twice they tried to turn to help, but the ultimate truth was uncertain, and the unacceptable delay ultimately made 12 people turn to the typical support system. Underneath the underground university, an unemployed unit tried to unite the union of the unhappy, unfriendly, and unkind, wearing uniforms and underwear soaked from an underwater leak. The uncontrolled unemployment rate was an unfortunate and unfair truth, unfairly ignored by the universe, and though the cause was unknown, the students, each unique, unexpectedly showed understanding, stood united, and refused to undo their efforts, even when the outcome seemed unimportant or unexpectedly unkind. Unlike the usual urban calm, an unpleasant and unreasonable noise came from upstairs, where an unsteady and unwilling guest had turned everything upside down, unwillingly upset by an unusually untidy room. It was unlikely he'd unload his feelings until the urgent urge passed, and though the situation was upsetting, we knew it was unnecessary to react unless he became truly unreasonable. So one of us went up, climbed to the upper floor, and made use of an unusually successful tactic to calm the unlucky, unsuccessful visitor, who had come upward with hope upon arrival. The user, once used to a usual routine, took a vacation via van through a vast valley filled with various vegetables and vehicles, where a vertical video captured a valuable venture. The varied version of events showed how victims of useless habits found value in variation, used up their time wisely, and achieved victory, because even something very small can be useful, valid, and surprisingly powerful when you vary your view. After the visitor walked up the village wall and saw the visible damage from war and violence, he wandered through the streets, virtually speechless, waiting for the waiter to wake and bring his wallet. The virus had spread violently, the vocabulary of peace was lost, and the vital vision of unity faded. Yet he didn't walk out, didn't want to, and instead raised his voice, voted for change, and walked on, waist aching, volume low. Wages gone, but hope intact. We watched the weather warm up as a wave of warmth washed away the weakness we wore from the cold. While washing up by the water, I got a warning to watch out for waste that could wear away the shore, so I washed off the mud, wore my boots, and walked the web of trails. Though the path was worn out, the website said the way was safe, and unlike weapons of war, nature's wealth doesn't wear off. On a wet Wednesday in the West, a well-known whisper echoed through the white wedding hall, where whoever turned the wheel of fate would weigh the weight of love. While the Western guests waited for the weekend, the weekly whistle signaled welcome, and wherever the bride went, she was followed by whoever cared, because the whole week had been about what matters, not whether or when or where, but which vows are kept, and whatever joy remains. The wise winner, whose wife was willing to witness the wild winter wind through the wide window, withdrew within herself without wine or wings, but with willingness to win. She wildly wished to understand why the wire snapped, and whom it hurt, while the wind wound around the house with a width unmatched. Willingly facing the storm, she held on, knowing that winning isn't just about will, but about the wish to endure and the wisdom to act. The woman, a writer working in a wooden cabin wrapped in wool, wrote down every word of her wonderful story about a wounded worker who worshipped the world despite worrying it would get worse. She had a wound on her wrist, but didn't worry about the worst. She knew writing was worth the work, and would work out in the end, so she continued writing, wrapped in wonder, ready to write back to those who wondered if it was worth it. Yeah, yesterday you wrongly yawned in the yellow zone of your yard, where a young youth had written "Zero Fear" on your wall, yet you said yes, knowing your year wasn't wasted, and that what's yours is yours, even if others think it's wrong. Remind yourself that yourself is enough.